HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Education of a Coroner, Lessons in Investigating Death, by John Bateson. Read by Kirby Heyborne. Prologue. Ana Valiente was 23 and working as a housekeeper at a senior center in San Rafael, California, when she disappeared. Originally from El Salvador, where her family still lived, she was hard-working, upbeat, and dependable. After she failed to show up for her job on December 6, 2006, co-workers reported her missing. 2 weeks later, she was still missing. Police had zeroed in on a suspect, though, 39-year-old Gregorio Mendez de Leon. He was born in Guatemala, married with 3 children, and worked as a driver in the Marin County Sanitary District's recycling center. According to other people at the center, he was in a sexual relationship with Ana, who had become pregnant. The recycling center had a camera that filmed cars as they drove in and out, and Mendez de Leon's car, with Ana visible in the passenger seat, was captured leaving the center on Tuesday, December 5th at 4:30 p.m. That made Mendez de Leon the last person to be seen with her. Later, a backhoe operator at the center, knowing that Ana had disappeared and Mendez de Leon was considered a person of interest, came forward and told police that he had dug a hole one night at Mendez de Leon's request in a remote area of the recycling center grounds. That was when things started to get interesting, Ken Holmes tells me. Holmes was the coroner of Marin County. He had been in the job 8 years at that point, but had worked in the coroner's office nearly 30 years altogether, first as an investigator, then as the assistant coroner. By 2006, he had handled hundreds of homicides and thousands of other deaths. Police brought Mendez de Leon in for questioning and, in short order, induced a confession. Mendez de Leon said that he and Ana were sitting in his Toyota sedan after dark on December 5th in front of a Wendy's restaurant in downtown San Rafael. They had an argument. Then Mendez de Leon took out a pocket knife and started stabbing Ana in the neck. She was a big woman, more than 200 pounds, and wedged into the small car. She couldn't get away, and Mendez de Leon continued to attack her. Within minutes, she was dead. Holmes pauses, shakes his head, then says, as often happens in cases like this, one problem quickly became 2. The first problem was what to do with Ana's body. Her killer knew that he had to get rid of it, but how? The second problem was what to do with his car. The interior, especially on the passenger side, was drenched with her blood. It became even bloodier when he decided to cut off her legs. She was too big for him to move otherwise. The recycling center wasn't far away, and Mendez de Leon decided to go there. Although it was after hours, the backhoe operator was still around, and Mendez de Leon convinced him to dig a hole at the rear of the property. The backhoe operator didn't know what the hole was for, but he was willing to do Mendez de Leon a favor. After he left, Mendez de Leon put Ana's legs in one plastic bag and the rest of her in another bag, maneuvered both bags into the hole, and pushed all of the dirt back into place to cover up everything. Then he got a truck and drove it over the site several times to compact the soil, after which he erased the tire marks. Now he just needed to get rid of his car. That was relatively easy. He took it to a friend's wrecking yard and had it crushed. He told the friend that he couldn't get it smogged, so rather than pay a junkyard to come and get it, he wanted it flattened, and then he would borrow a pickup truck and take his flattened car to a metal scrapper. In his confession, Mendez de Leon indicated the general area where Ana's body had been buried. It was dark at the time, though, and he didn't know the exact location. The backhoe operator didn't know either, or how deep the hole was. He thought it was about 5 feet, but he wasn't really sure. That was when the coroner's office was summoned. Holmes was briefed by police, then he and his staff went to work. "We knew we were going to have to go digging," he says, "and we were going to have to do an archaeological dig. If you know that there's a body, you have to be forensically perfect from the get-go, which means using small paintbrushes and soup spoons and small garden trowels, because we don't know how deep it is to the body." Over the years, Holmes had worked with the Federal Bureau of Investigation on numerous cases and maintained good relations. FBI agents were involved any time a death occurred on federal property or a federal employee was killed, or a crime was committed that crossed state lines. Other times, though, if local agents weren't busy and Holmes could use help on a case, the FBI provided it. In this instance, Holmes received a call offering the assistance of the FBI's Special Response Unit, 4 agents with expertise in archaeological digs. He had never worked with this particular team before, which was based out of the area, but accepted immediately. The team showed up towing a box trailer that was 16 to 18 feet long. When they opened up the back, Holmes stared in amazement. It was like Costco for forensics. There was every conceivable thing you could use or need, including Tyvek suits for all of us, little wire flags in various colors to mark locations, and pop-up tents to hide the dig from news helicopters, which were hovering all around us after reporters got wind of the case. Without knowing the exact location, the FBI team marked off the area in 6-foot squares, then used flat shovels to scrape away at the soil, which was full of shale and rocks. Whenever they got deep enough to realize that soil hadn't been disturbed, they moved on to another square of the grid. The dig went on for 2 days before they found the spot and dug down 5 feet to the bags. One of Holmes's investigators, Darrell Harris, was there the first day, and another investigator, Pam Carter, was present the second day. Holmes dropped by several times as well. Both days throughout the process, federal agents deferred to the coroner's office. "It wasn't like you see on TV," Holmes says, "where the FBI comes in and pushes everybody out of the way. They didn't do that. They absolutely didn't do that. They were our best friends and loved doing this kind of stuff because they didn't get to do it very often. It wasn't their jurisdiction, and they knew it. They were just lending their resources and expertise. Someone even came around at lunchtime and took our orders for sandwiches and coffee or soft drinks. They never sent us a bill for anything." While the dig was taking place, police located Mendez de Leon's crushed car. Holmes had it taken to a large training center at the Novato Fire Department so that firefighters could open it up. They had never worked on anything so compacted before, he says, and considered it great practice. They also weren't used to participating in a homicide investigation, which added a thrill factor. The jaws of life is a big compressed air separator. Its hydraulic ram uses pneumatic pressure to pull apart smashed objects, piece by piece. In 2.5 hours, firefighters separated the door panels, seats, and carpets, all of which were covered with blood. Holmes was able to confirm Anna's identity through a fingerprint check with the Department of Homeland Security. She didn't have a driver's license, but possessed a valid passport, so her fingerprints were in the DHS database. Holmes also had the blood in Mendez de Leon's car analyzed, and it matched that of Ana Valiente. With that information, Mendez de Leon was charged with the murder of Ana and also the 6-week-old child she was carrying. Since double homicides are subject to the death penalty in California, it was a potential capital punishment case. During legal proceedings, however, the second murder charge was dropped because the unborn child wasn't far enough along to meet the definition of a fetus according to state law. In his trial, which Holmes testified at, Mendez de Leon recanted his confession and said that an unidentified third party was to blame. According to his public defender, Mendez de Leon was afraid that he would be targeted and killed at San Quentin Prison. The prison is in Marin County and is where all male death row inmates in California are incarcerated. Like many prisons, it is controlled by gangs, and Mendez de Leon would be at their mercy. That was of little concern to the prosecution, however. In a plea bargain, Mendez de Leon was sentenced to 16 years. Looking back on the case, Holmes says with a bemused smile, "Just another day at the office," knowing that it was anything but. Then again, there weren't many days that were routine. Chapter 1. First Blush. I first met Ken Holmes in 2010 when I interviewed him for my book The Final Leap, about suicides from the Golden Gate Bridge. I was executive director of a nationally certified crisis intervention and suicide prevention center in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, and Ken's office was responsible for conducting the autopsies of most Golden Gate Bridge jumpers, as well as for notifying their families of the death. After the book came out, I was recruited to serve on the board of the Bridge Rail Foundation, an all-volunteer non-profit organization dedicated to ending suicides on the bridge. Ken was on the board also, and we had numerous opportunities to talk further. It didn't take long for me to realize that his experiences over nearly 40 years in the Marin County Coroner's office and the cases he'd handled would make a riveting subject for a book. I had another reason for writing The Education of a Coroner. I didn't know much about the workings of a coroner's office and wanted to learn more. How do coroners approach a death scene, and what do they look for? How are families notified of a death, and what psychological techniques are employed? How has the world of forensic pathology changed with advances in technology? The first time Ken and I met to discuss it was in a brew pub in Larkspur in central Marin County. He had been retired 3 years by that time, although he still had and continues to have frequent contact with many of his former colleagues, and also attends annual conferences of the California State Coroners Association, where he was once president. We had communicated by email before then, and I had run my general idea by him. I would review 800 case files that he had pre-selected and copied onto electronic disks. Then we would schedule a series of days when we would meet and discuss the cases that I thought were the most interesting. Along the way, we also would talk about his background, training, responsibilities, lessons learned, and people he worked with. First, though, I said I needed to get a sense of whether the stories he told were compelling and had universal appeal. "Sure," he said, and with no further prompting, he launched into a thumbnail sketch of one case, then another, and another, until after only a few minutes my head was spinning. He apologized and said that once he started talking about his work, it was hard for him to stop. Holmes is a natural storyteller, and his deep, melodic voice is both authoritative and soothing. A barrel-chested man with sharp eyes, even in his 70s, strong hands from having spent years outdoors, and a handsome face framed by a trimmed gray beard, he is someone who makes friends easily and holds on to them because at the end of the day, and especially at this stage in his life, friends and family are what matter most. He is quick to laugh, especially at himself, and has a range of knowledge that is impressive. Whether it is medicine, politics, hunting, guns, home repair, sports, food, wine, or cars, he can hold his own in a conversation with anyone. "Let's back up," I said, "and focus on one case for now. You pick." "Okay," he said, and he proceeded to tell me some of the highlights of the Carol Filippelli case, which is described a little later in this book. At the end, all I could say was, "How many more stories do you have like that?" He shrugged and said, "Dozens." Some of the cases cast Holmes in the national spotlight because of who they involved. rock legend Jerry Garcia, rapper Tupac Shakur, porn kings Jim and Artie Mitchell, and the infamous Trailside Killer. It was the deaths of people who weren't well known, however, that remained the most vivid and noteworthy in his mind. Several cases took nearly a decade to close, 2 took 20 years, 1 took 30, and 1 took 44 years. It might seem like a luxury for a coroner to be able to pursue cases so doggedly. Certainly that's not possible in large cities and statewide coroners' offices. In some respects it was, but Holmes's belief, then and now, is that family and friends of the deceased deserve to know what happened, no matter how long it takes. Coroners deal with death, but their purpose is to find answers for the living. If the work of coroners were less dramatic, we wouldn't have so many TV shows about it. Holmes watches some of them and says that they get most, though not all, of the details right. Even so, inevitably he comes away thinking that real life is more moving than any fictionalized treatment can be. Nothing beats a story that happens to be true. It helps to have a glamorous setting, which is why the original CSI TV show was set in Las Vegas, and there is now CSI Miami, CSI New York, and NCIS Los Angeles. If the emphasis were on gritty, then we would have CSI Camden, CSI Detroit, and NCIS Compton. The setting where Holmes worked is every bit as enthralling as the biggest cities with the brightest lights. I say that not because I was raised in Marin. As an adolescent, it didn't seem all that exciting, but because the county has a national reputation despite its small size. Part of that is due to its physical beauty. Situated just north of San Francisco, Marin is surrounded by water. The Pacific Ocean lies to the west, and the eastern and southern borders end at San Francisco Bay. Only the northern portion abuts land, the beginning of California's legendary wine country. Otherwise, access is across the Golden Gate Bridge to the south or the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to the east. There are no large urban centers, processing plants, factories, or notable industries in Marin. Mostly, the county consists of coastline, rolling hills, dairy farms, and small towns. Hundreds of thousands of people come every year to visit Point Reyes National Seashore, Golden Gate National Recreation Area, Muir Woods, Mount Tamalpais, Stinson Beach, Tomales Bay, and Samuel P. Taylor State Park. The other reason why Marin is well known is its affluence. It ranks among the top 20 counties in the United States in terms of household income and is home to rock stars, movie stars, professional athletes, and wealthy business executives. The median price of homes is just under $1 million, and in many communities it's considerably more. This doesn't mean that all is rosy, however. In 2014, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation reported that nearly 25% of adults in Marin engage in binge drinking during any given month, one of the highest averages in the state. More than 30 residents die per year from drug overdoses, a large number in a small county. In addition, Marin is second to San Francisco when it comes to suicides from the Golden Gate Bridge. Marin also has pockets of poverty. In the Canal District of San Rafael, people from dozens of cultures, speaking a multitude of languages, live close together in low-income housing. In Marin City, built during World War II to house shipyard workers and immigrants, local residents, predominantly African American, lived for years in crowded tenements until gentrification started pushing them out, creating new sources of tension. Then there is San Quentin Prison, the oldest prison in California and one of the largest penitentiaries in the United States. Built in 1852 on 432 acres of shoreline property in Marin, San Quentin is, almost certainly, the most expensive piece of real estate in America, and perhaps the world, that is devoted to housing convicted felons. In 2009, the land was estimated to be worth $2 billion, and it has only increased in value since then. All of California's 750 male death row inmates are locked up there, as well as more than 4,000 other hardened criminals, male and female. To a motorist approaching Marin County from the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, the prison looks at first glance like a huge sand-colored hotel on the waterfront. As one gets closer, however, one sees the 12-foot-high concrete walls that are topped by coils of electrified barbed wire, notices that all of the window openings are mere slits, even though the view outside them is spectacular, and knows that San Quentin was built with a much different purpose in mind. The Coroner's Office. It's in this setting that the Coroner's Office in Marin County operates. Throughout Holmes's career, it was on the second floor of the Marin Civic Center in San Rafael, the county seat. The building was the last one designed by famed architect Frank Lloyd Wright, and features a roof the color of the sky, scalloped balconies, and pink stucco walls, all intended to blend into the surrounding environment. The office, which has since moved, isn't what one might expect. Before I interviewed Holmes the first time in 2010, I envisioned it to be part morgue, with shrouded bodies laid out on stainless steel tables waiting to be autopsied, and part laboratory, with slides being inspected under microscopes. Like many small counties, however, Marin doesn't have a morgue because it's too expensive. Instead, the coroner's office contracts with local mortuaries and private physicians to receive the bodies of dead people and conduct autopsies when warranted. The county also doesn't have a lab for analyzing specimens that are collected at a death scene. Fingernail scrapings, pubic hair samples, vaginal swabs, and the like are sent to outside labs. There are only a handful in California that specialize in this kind of analysis, with the primary one operated by the State Department of Justice. Samples from any case that might go to court, particularly homicide cases, are sent there. The DOJ lab doesn't handle body fluids, though, so blood, urine, and gastric samples are sent elsewhere. Employee offices look the same as the offices of any other business with a modest budget. Older desks and chairs, older computers and phones, and bookcases crammed with special texts, trade journals, binders, and miscellaneous papers. For all of Holmes's 36 years, there was a staff of 7. 6 employees, the coroner, assistant coroner, 3 death investigators, and a secretary, were full-time. One position, the medical transcriber, was part-time. He or she took the voice recordings of forensic pathologists during autopsies and turned them into written summaries. The common areas are more distinctive. There are evidence lockers, an old bank safe to store money that is collected at a death scene, refrigeration units to store specimen samples, and dozens of 4-drawer metal file cabinets that are filled with case files, some of which date back more than 150 years, to the time when California became a state. The role of the coroner originated in 12th century England. Crowners, as they were known at the time, conducted inquests on behalf of King Richard I to identify the deceased, determine how they died, and, most important, collect death taxes on their estates. It was the height of the Crusades. The Catholic Church was trying to restore Christianity in and around the Holy Lands, and money was needed to finance numerous campaigns. Coroners' offices today are vestiges of this royal system. Coroners are either elected by the populace or appointed by designated entities, with the requirements varying state by state, and oftentimes county by county. In the highest form, coroners are medical examiners, meaning they are licensed physicians who are trained and certified in forensic pathology. Most people assume that all coroners are MEs, but this isn't the case. Many coroners are licensed physicians who have no training in forensics, while in hundreds of communities across the country, including Marin County, the coroner isn't required to have any medical training at all, much less a medical degree. He or she just needs to have a clean record, meaning no felony convictions, be 21 or older, and have a high school diploma. Some counties don't even require that, however. One county in Indiana elected a coroner who was 18 and still in high school. A 2015 review by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine compared county coroners and medical examiners. The biggest benefit of county coroners, according to the review, is that they reflect the will of the people. In American political culture, elected officials represent a community's needs and values better than anyone else because they are chosen by voters. In addition, county coroners have equal footing with other locally elected officials, members of the Board of Supervisors, sheriffs, judges, and district attorneys, which enables them to operate independently from these entities. The main drawback is that the coroner may not be medically proficient, since it's not a requirement of the job. On the medical examiner side, the major advantage, according to the review, is that the overall quality of death investigations is better. In addition, there is more uniformity. For statewide medical examiner offices, there are the added benefits of centralized administration, which is expensive to start but less expensive to sustain, and improved service to rural areas, which often don't have the capacity to operate coroner offices on their own. 19 states, in general the smallest ones, have a state medical examiner system. The largest states, including California, Texas, New York, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Georgia, have a mix of medical examiner and county coroner offices. As the most populous state, California is unusual, but not unique, in that the coroner's office is combined with the sheriff's department in 49 of 58 counties. In these areas, the sheriff serves as coroner, too, despite having little or no medical training, and appoints another law enforcement person to oversee the day-to-day duties, who, in all likelihood, has no medical training either. The result is that the work of the coroner's office is controlled by the sheriff, which can create problems. Because sheriffs focus on criminal activity, the emphasis of the coroner's office in these counties is to support homicide investigations. Less time is spent delving into deaths by accident, suicide, or natural causes, and frequently in these instances autopsies aren't conducted in order to save money. Cases in which the manner of death is undetermined but clearly isn't homicide also get short shrift, leaving families in the dark as to what caused their loved one to die. The lack of national standards for coroners is hard to understand inasmuch as a death certificate is one of our most important documents. It is used by families to collect life insurance, file for payment from special funds for certain types of deaths, such as mesothelioma, and change names on deeds, trusts, and other valuable assets. Death certificates also are used by the government to stop Social Security payments, by businesses to change or eliminate pension payouts and health care coverage, by various public and private agencies to inform current funding decisions and future policies, and by researchers to track how society is changing. In Working Stiff, 2 years, 262 bodies, and the making of a medical examiner, author Judy Melinek talks about the value of a death certificate. It's no big deal if you don't have a birth certificate, she says. Other forms of identification will suffice to secure a job, open a bank account, even file for Social Security. However, if your survivors cannot produce a death certificate after your demise, they will descend into bureaucratic purgatory. They can't bury your body, transport it across state lines, liquidate your investments, or inherit anything you have willed them. Coroners aren't the only people who are authorized to sign death certificates. Depending on the state, a primary care physician, attending physician, non-attending physician, or nurse practitioner can sign. Most of the time, these signatories confirm a death by natural causes where no investigation is needed. In homicides, suicides, and accidents, coroners typically sign the certificate after an autopsy has been performed. cause and manner. The results from an autopsy and the findings of toxicology tests helped the coroner determine the cause and
Sample complete. Ready to continue?